have a question for you
Right.
because this is a question I'm going to actually start asking my guests from this podcast going forwards. I've decided because I had these conversations with my friends, two of my friends, and they didn't seem to see a problem with the way capitalism currently runs. And both of my friends are Nigerians and they grew up in Nigeria, so they're from Africa. And even though, if we look at it deeply, I believe it's the reason why a lot of the destabilization and the state of the continent is the way it is because of capitalism, starting from slavery to destabilization to colonization to all kinds of different things that's been happening. But they couldn't see it as a bad thing. So I guess I need to open my mind and start asking all of my guests, what do you think of capitalism the way it is currently? Because my personal take on it is that there must be a balance. It cannot be extremes. Americans love to talk in extremes. It's like their capitalism is extreme, unchecked. Nobody ever checks it. It just does whatever it wants. Or communism, where millions of people die of starvation because nobody knows how to run a farm and so on. My question to you is, what do you think of capitalism the way it is currently?
I'm not going to sit here and completely deride capitalism.
Yeah.
Because I think that it has benefited billions of people around the world, billions
Yeah.
of people. Lots of people have been lifted out of poverty as a direct result of the model that we call capitalism.
What is that model?
That whole model of growth. Continual growth, the seeking profit, seeking a return on your investment, something that gives you more than you put in the first place.
Yes. But the thing is, I agree with that fundamental perspective, but I feel like it should be tempered with something.
Yeah, I agree. I think unchecked, you end up with a situation like I mentioned earlier, where you have unlimited products or goods produced with very little. Technology, AI, robotics, automation will supercharge that. We need to think differently about models of growth. Indeed, rather, growth is always necessary. I think we need to think differently about products and services and how we procure those and what is necessary versus what is desired. If you think about the nature of businesses and the business of servicing human wants, civil society, I'll include charitable organizations, NGOs, I'll even include government within that, is in the business of human needs. Now, I think that sometimes you might want something, but you don't need it. And as I mentioned earlier, we sometimes conflate these two things, right?
I love that.
I want a bigger car, I want a bigger house, right? But do I need that stuff? I think it's really important to make sure that we understand actually what is crucial, what is fundamental to living, and often isn't the stuff that we want. What we need isn't what we want.
So business isn't the business of wants. Civil society isn't the business of human needs.
Yeah.
I like that. I've never quite heard it phrased like that before. Entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff serves a want, and civil society serves needs. And what's in civil society? You said charitable organizations, governments, you said?
Governments. And don't get me wrong, that's highly reductive, right? Not exclusively true. There are lots of businesses that could provide services that we actually do need. But ostensibly, that's probably the model that we live under. And I think that it means that we have to ask ourselves some quite crucial questions about what do we actually need. During COVID, we asked those questions, right? What do we need? We need healthcare. We need human connection. We need to be able to have, an ability to get the stuff that is important to keep us alive, right? Whether that's food or whether it's, as I say, healthcare, all of these other things. We became far less materialistic during that period. And I think we've sort of reverted to type now that COVID's over, right? But I think that those are really crucial questions. And those are questions that will come into sharp focus in the next 50 years. And I think Africa, going back to your original question, is a really interesting position because of where it is economically, continentally. And I know that there's a vast difference between those who are doing well, countries that are doing well in Africa and countries that are not doing as well. But if you average it out over the entire continent, Africa has the least to fall from where it is, and it has the most to grow in terms of where it is economically. Now, the economies that have the most to lose, I find, are those that are really holding on to the status quo as much as they possibly can.
That's what I'm saying.
Because these are models that have benefited the global north to a large degree.
For hundreds of years.
For hundreds of years. But I think we're going to see quite a shift because you have the nature of how we learn. I mentioned something earlier about the individual versus societal needs. And education, I think, is a really interesting space because The way we think about pedagogy and the way we think about learning is often retrospective. It's based on historical needs. People go to university, they get onto the courses that have proved successful historically. These people that did that course came out and they got this salary. I'm going to do that course. Yeah. So what that doesn't do is to take into consideration the rapid change that you and I talked about earlier. If things are changing so quickly, then how do you look not back but forward? How do you anticipate what will be required tomorrow?
Yeah.
So education has a retrospective business model, and that is eating itself as well. And I think there's a danger in that. And that largely it's been this individualistic. How do I better myself? How do I improve my own situation? Versus a social or societal model where education is about thinking about things like research in order to solve big social problems, or about collaboration. There's a guy called Jonathan Grant who wrote this book called New Power University. And it's about education having the role not only as a space for learning and as a space for research, but as a space for social responsibility. Because what is the social responsibility of education? And I think that is a question that we've forgotten in recent years, because education has been about personal betterment.
Yeah.
And the reason I talk about this is because these big social problems that we touched upon earlier require a broad church. They require a big tent of individuals from different spaces and places who don't necessarily agree to come together to help solve those challenges. Now, how that impacts Africa is that I think the nature of having to be entrepreneurial on the continent, it's almost inbuilt to people across the continent. You know, that there's entrepreneurialism is just what you do because you have to.
Yeah, because the government isn't going to help you.
Exactly. Yeah. It comes from need.
Yeah.
And whereas to a large degree, you'll go to university, you get a job in the global north. Yeah. Now, I think that the former model of education, the self-driven learning, the self-directed learning, the responding to change, is going to be more relevant and more apparent as we move into the future, and things constantly change and they change more rapidly. They're going to be more relevant to ensuring that you stay connected to a constantly changing world than doing a course in a university that has been successful for the last 50 years. Now, as I say, I didn't go to university, so perhaps this is my own biases showing through, right? But I think that the way in which we learn has to fundamentally change. I think Africa is in a really beneficial position as a result of this, simply because you have an enormous youth population.
Yeah.